Okay, let's start. It's 20 after 12. Greetings, good afternoon, STCC. Here we are virtual again. I have been making the rounds, so to speak. I've been, as I've called them, house calls to a number of our different offices and programs and services. And I want to say up front, I'm so grateful for everyone's resolve and persistence. I know, again, it is a tough time and a very different time still. Certainly in the city of Springfield and some of our surrounding towns and areas, we see an uptick in COVID-19. And I want to urge again that people continue to be cautious. Please stay safe. The college certainly is going to continue to do its level best to ensure for those students and staff on campus that we're doing everything we can to ensure people are healthy. We're here today, though, to focus, and again, I'm very, very pleased that we can give over a all-college town hall to this very important process called accreditation. NECHE, right, the New England Commission of Higher Education, is coming in April of next year for what is the decennial accreditation visit. So only once every 10 years do they come on site. Again, we'll know likely at some point in the spring whether it actually will be virtual or not. But a really, really important topic. There has been some tremendous effort for well over a year now by, I think, well over 100 people around the college. So I just want to say my thanks. I want to express my gratitude for everybody who has contributed and for this final push. You can see from the slide that projections is an important part of this self-study that we create. So it's the idea that really NECHE is keenly invested in a generative iterative process where we essentially offer to them our self-assessment, and that includes not just who we are now, but also where we project to be. And obviously that is very hard and very difficult now during a global pandemic. But nevertheless, I know great conversations are happening and will continue to happen the rest of this semester. Let me turn now to our two co-chairs, our Dean of Institutional Research, Suzanne Smith, and co-chair Christina Atwater, Professor of Business Administration, who have been ably shepherding, facilitating, stewarding this process. Suzanne and Chris, I'll turn it over to you. And again, thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. And after 17 months on this gloomy day, we tiptoe towards the projection phase of the self-study. And there's still plenty of time for everyone who wants to be involved. I'm gonna give you a brief update of what we're going to cover today, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Suzanne to give you a status update, but I'll let her say hello first before we move on.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
So today, John, if you could advance the slide. Today, we're going to be focusing on first an overview of the timeline. Suzanne's going to tell you where we've been and where we're going. And then I'm going to talk about ways you can still get involved and put your voice into action. Then we're going to do a discussion of projection, which will include the topics of current plans that we have in place. And so we'll hear from 4 people from around campus that will give you an update and kind of overview of their current plans that are in place. And then we're going to pause for a question and answer at the end. And we hope that will be a lively discussion where you can either put your questions in the chat or you can ask them live. And if you have no questions prepared, Suzanne and I have prepared some somewhat provocative questions to ask each other. So that's where we're going to go today. Okay, so we'll move on to the timeline update.
Okay, so I want to review with you first where we've been after the year of committee work on each of the standards. Back in March, we sort of had to put some things on pause. The committees had started to do some appraisal, which is asking ourselves how well we meet the standards and what we can improve. So committees had done some of that work, and then when COVID hit, there was a pause. They handed over their drafts in May to 3 authors who would do a first draft. And that was Chris Atwater, Matt Gravel, and myself. And what we did was we worked the committee notes along with additional information if we needed to find it into a draft for each of the standards. And we reviewed each other's drafts. We then turned it over to first readers, what we called first readers. And in general, those were people who had chaired one of the committees or who had maybe oversight of the area. So for the academic plan, Dr. DeBroglie took a look at that, or I think with institutional resources, there had been some shift in personnel, and so that may have been turned over to someone who had expertise in the area. So from there, we got additional feedback, worked those into the drafts. It then went to another sort of revision editing phase with Dr. Cook and Matt Gravel, and then it came back to Chris and I. We have sent that draft out to the community last week. It comes with a feedback form. We're not calling it a survey. We're calling it a feedback form. So it's something that you can enter into. There's a link that accompanied the draft that went out to the campus. You can go in as many times as you want. So the draft is over 100 pages at the moment. You can read standard 3 if that's what interests you. And if you have feedback, if you have additional information, if you have questions, you can go in and write that in, and then you can leave the survey and you can come back. There's also a place where you can upload a document if you have something that you feel like needs to be in this draft. You can include a link to something that's already out there published. So that's open until November 6th, and we're encouraging anyone who wants to take a look at that to get involved in that level. We've also formed a self-study advisory group. So this is a cross-functional team that is going to try and move us from the appraisals, which is sort of, again, the question, how are we doing on these standards and what do we need to improve? To then that flows into projections, which are, okay, what are we going to commit to working on or doing in the future? So that committee is going to work together to hone those projections. Then we also have feedback that we're soliciting from the Board of Trustees. So when we get all the feedback, we're going to incorporate that into the draft, and we should have something, we'll be doing that from mid-November to December, and then it will go to a one voice editor. And that's something that NECHE wants us to do to make sure it doesn't look like many people wrote it, that the chapters are integrated, that the style is consistent. That'll happen in December to January. It'll go to the Board of Trustees at the full board meeting in January, and it needs to be shipped off by mid-February. It has to be 6 weeks before the visiting team comes. There will be an invitation for public comments, and that's supposed to go out no later than 1 month prior to the visit. However, that invitation is already out on our website. If you go to About Us under accreditation and you scroll down, there's the invitation there. But NECHE also requires us to put it out into newspapers or alumni lists, any kind of publication that has a readership of people who are knowledgeable of the institution and have an interest in the institution. So that will happen as well. And then the site visit itself is April 11th to 14th. It will be virtual because we're going to be virtual. So we're asking you to please put those dates on your calendar because the visiting team is going to want to meet with people. They're going to want to meet with groups of students. They're going to want to meet with groups of faculty, with members of the Board of Trustees, with administrators. And their job is to verify what's in the self-study and maybe try and understand a little bit if they have questions about what's underneath what's in the self-study. So that's where they do that. So we really want to have people put that on the calendars to be available, to be able to provide additional feedback. So you can advance the slide.
Okay, so I'm going to underscore some areas in which you can get involved still and where your voice can be heard. So Suzanne mentioned a couple of these things, but I want to start with the governance survey for Standard 3. That was sent out at the beginning of this week. As of this morning, we had approximately 100 replies out of a possible 800. So I would ask you if you can, in a relatively short period of time, to please go let your voice be heard on the governance survey. This is an area that we know is important for accreditation and something that we have not done a lot of in the past, and we really need to, kind of keep this going in years to come. So this will be the first of the governance surveys, and then on an annual basis, we'll be able to see this again and to kind of compare the results year over year. A couple of weeks back, Suzanne and I met with the department chairs during a meeting with Dr. Cook and Dr. DeBurley, and we provided a survey that was focused on program review. As of now, we've received 15 out of 30 responses. So I would encourage you as faculty and staff to speak to individual department chairs if you have feedback about that. And then also for department chairs to make sure they send that feedback through the survey to I think it's Qualtrics, right? It's a Qualtrics survey. Thirdly, we have, as Suzanne mentioned, the NECHE self-study feedback. This is the opportunity for you to go in as many times and provide feedback. The questions are open response, so you just type in what your feedback is about each standard. And as of today, drum roll, we have 0 results out of campus community. So today's a great day to cuddle in with a good book. It's about 126 pages. Feel free to pick up that self-study report. And again, if you go through standard 1 and there's something you want to provide feedback on, you can log in directly into the survey, provide your result, your feedback for standard 1, and then a couple days later do the same for standards 2 and 3. We're looking to gather all of this feedback in the next week or so, or 2 weeks, so that we can incorporate it mid-November into another draft. Also, before the site visit, you are welcome to communicate directly to NECHE, and if there are people in the community that you think also would want to communicate, they are always welcome to send public information to NECHE. On the screen, you can see, as Suzanne mentioned, if you click on About Stick and then Accreditation, the information to contact NECHE is there. And during the year of a comprehensive self-evaluation, NECHE mentions that they pay more intent attention to this feedback. So a call for feedback about the college, not about the self-study report, but about the college, will be sent out to the community in newspapers and other periodicals so that we can ask the community for that feedback. And then lastly, as Suzanne mentioned, please keep those dates of April 11th to the 14th so that during the site visit, if you are requested to attend a feedback session, that you're able to do so. So now let's talk about projection and what we would consider projection. So the reminder is, and Suzanne mentioned this, is that the description is what we do. We've already pretty much covered the description in our self-study report. And we've gone through a lot of the appraisal process, although we still recognize there's room for appraisal. So based on the feedback that you provide us, we still have room to integrate that feedback into the self-study report. But projection is our commitment to the future to improve. And this is NECHE's definition of projection, that it's our commitment as an institution to maintain and enhance the strengths and to address areas of concern. So those are not only ones that we self-identify, but also ones that perhaps the commission might identify for us as well. So Suzanne's going to now give you a couple of examples of projection, just so that you could kind of see how that works and where it comes from.
Okay, great. And before I do that, we do have a question about where does the NECHE self-study feedback survey is located. It went out last week in an email. And so, and attached to the email, there's actually a Word document containing the self-study. Am I correct about that, Chris? Yes. And there's a link to the survey in that. So check your email. It went to campus community. Okay, and so I want to just go give some examples of what projections look like, and I'm doing this from examples from other colleges, so that we can focus on kind of what it's made of and what the elements are. So a projection is going to be sort of a commitment that the college makes that they're going to work on an area, or they're going to continue work that they've found they're doing well. It usually contains an action, a person responsible or parties responsible to enact that action, and then a time frame over which that work will be done. So here's an example of a college that they appraised their mission statement. They found that it did provide clear purpose for the college. They had added a set of core values, and they felt like that hadn't been promoted to the college, and that internal and external stakeholders weren't aware of it. So their projection was simple. Moving forward, the college will make a greater effort to educate internal and external stakeholders about those core values. They have an action that they'll, and it's a little broad and vague here, but they'll develop ways to promote the vision and the core values. But they do have a person responsible, who in this case was the president, and they had a time frame for which that would be done. So we could have the next slide. Okay, another example, it was an appraisal finding under the institutional educational effectiveness area, where they felt like their ability to do additional reporting was limited, and they had added a person to help produce more reports. But they felt like they needed to do a more efficient report writing. And so their projection that followed that was that they had, again, a time frame by fall 2018. They had a WHO, which is IRP, that was their Institutional Research and Planning Office, would develop these additional areas of reporting. And it's just, they list them, 3 bullets. This is what we're gonna do. So projections are kind of like that. They're short-ish. They give a time frame, they give a responsible party so that there's some accountability. And then the next slide is another example. Again, this had to do with planning and evaluation. They were looking at their program review process and realizing that some of it had fallen away. Some of what they had planned to do had fallen away because of staffing changes. And so this was their time to kind of reinvigorate that. And so they also realized that their program review, like we have, where it's on a 5-year cycle, they had a long cycle, and they realized they needed annual updates. So they put that in, they said who's responsible, and they gave a time frame. So those are just 3 examples, but you can, sort of think about some of the things that we'll find in our self-study that are appraisals of things that we want to work on, and what that might lead to for planning in the future. So next slide.
So when we thought about how we would create these projections based on the self-study appraisal piece, we wanted to put together a cross-functional group that included people from all areas of the college, and made sure that the voices were heard from different stakeholders. So what you see on screen here is a list of the self-study advisory group, with Suzanne, myself, and Tracy Trottier facilitating. And then we have 6 department chairs that are involved, 2 from LAPS, 2 from STEM, and 2 from SHIPS. And some of them have already been identified, a couple more still to come. But so this is where the faculty voice would be heard. So if faculty have input, they should see these department chairs to make sure that their voice and their feedback is brought to the table. You also see that we have people from other functional areas in the college that again, will be there to kind of fortify these commitments for the future. So we have each of the deans involved, admissions, academic affairs, student affairs, etc. So now what we want to do is we want to move to some of the plans that are already in place. Some of the plans that are in place will begin to identify and inform projections for us. They may not be comprehensive, but they'll inform the projections for the future. So Suzanne's going to introduce the individuals here.
Okay, so for the academic plan, that's something that has been in progress since I think the beginning of the summer, late spring, and Dr. DeBurley will present where that's at. And that was, in part, in part informed by what's already been in the self-study. So there's a student retention plan, which Darcy Kemp will present, an information technology plan, and a campus master plan. Now, all of these you'll find descriptions of in standard 2, because that's planning and evaluation. But the timing of strategic plans when they're written, and then more operational plans it's gonna have some overlap throughout time. And so we wanted just to have these people just give us a snapshot of what those plans are at the moment, and they will be detailed in the self-study as well. So with that, I'd like to just introduce Dr. DeBurley to cover the academic plan.
Okay, thanks very much, Suzanne. Okay, I think I just want to, as we talk about this, the purpose of the academic plan really was to outline STCC academic goals and how these goals would be met over the next 2 to 3 years. This should not be considered, or what is conventionally recognized as a sort of, in higher ed, as an academic master plan, which normally is a 1 to 2 year venture that provides an in-depth exploration into all matters pertaining to academic affairs, to include by school, detailed departmental plans, assessing curriculum and program needs, future development, enrollment and retention, and program needs, also including facilities, technology, and personnel. The academic plan that we're going to be distributing does not have all of that. There was no way we could possibly have done that. This is the result of 3 months' work and is really intended to be a dynamic, AKA a working document. And it really functions as a series of work plans addressing a selection of areas for which academic affairs has a major responsibility. As mentioned, the academic planning committee convened in June of this past summer, with the goal of distributing its findings, hopefully in this next week or so. The plan has been done and is getting formatted, so hopefully we'll have a nice clean version to distribute for comments. There was a 17-member committee, and it met approximately 6 times over the summer as a whole, in addition to the work group meetings, which prepared section submissions. 2 faculty from each of the 3 schools were representative of on the committee, and the All-Union Congress Academic Standing Committee nominated 2 of the faculty participating. Additionally, there were key administrators responsible for multiple areas across academic affairs participating, as well as Dr. Kyoto Woods, Assistant Dean of Student Initiatives, who was representing student affairs. When you see the academic plan, you'll see that work plans accompany each section and were developed to indicate how the goals will be met, to identify the collaborators and the resources, state action items, note the challenges, develop timelines, and where relevant, develop measurable outcomes. To the committee's knowledge, no academic plan has been developed at STCC in the last 20 years, and no one has been able to locate any reference to any previous academic plan. So the result of what we have for you and we'll be distributing is that there's no reference to past plans. The committee itself determined the areas of interest and priority. And while all the areas addressed in this plan are important and will benefit the academic enterprise, particular areas of priority are early college partnerships and initiatives, general education and civic learning, improving diversity, equity, and inclusion, online instruction, and pathways to success, particularly reviewing the liberal arts and STEM cores. Okay. Right. It's important to remember, as you all know, that this plan, of course, in many ways was framed by the COVID crisis, which highlighted the need for STCC to look at its student supports and what's needed to enable the students to function in this digital age. Computers and hotspots were distributed to students. Nevertheless, many of our students faced considerable challenges due to the economic downturn. And as a result, many high school and college students were unable to access the education that we offer. So efforts to improve access, reduce time in programs, equip faculty and students with digital skills, decrease cost to students, provide guided pathways, and coherence in educational programming are reflected in this plan. Okay. And a comprehensive academic plan will have to be a portion of the overall strategic plan, which the institution will be embarking upon sometime in 2021, as the current student success plan, which we have indicated is considered to be our strategic plan, expires. What you have in the slide are really the 10 areas that were covered in the academic plan, and that we will, as I said, we'll be distributing to you this week. It'll come to you in alpha order. And again, I want to thank very much the committee who worked on this plan. We pulled together a lot in 3 months, and much was accomplished. I'm not reading the components. I think you could all read those for yourselves. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. DeBurley. So next up, if you could advance the slide, we have Darcy Kemp, VP of Student Affairs.
Thank you so much. So today I'm going to focus on the student retention plan, and which was drafted in 2018 and ran through 2020. So today I'd like to focus on the 3 primary areas that were identified to improve student persistence and graduation. And that was through increasing overall college retention, increasing fall to spring and fall to fall student persistence and retention rates, and increasing the 3 to 5 year student completion rates while closing completion gaps between Black and Latino students as compared to their white counterparts. The student retention plan, as Dr. DeBurley had mentioned, has had some adjustments due to COVID considerations as well. So what I'd like to do is highlight the 4 priorities that were identified in the plan, give you a sense of the overall goal associated with that priority, and then some strategies that we have been able to complete, some that are in progress, and some that we've had to adjust due to COVID. So the first priority identified in the plan is recruitment. And the goal is to improve new student preparation for success in college by aligning student expectations with likely experiences, and to be sure that students are able to openly ask questions and navigate college so they can attain success. One of the strategies in this area was to develop and offer a new student orientation video to online students who could not attend on-campus sessions. We actually have that new student orientation video and had made it available to the majority of students who were interested in enrolling this fall semester. That was escalated in part due to campus curtailment, but I also want to let everyone know that we are currently working on a Spanish-speaking new student orientation as a next step. We did see increased participation in our new student orientation program as a result of offering the online version. A strategy that is in progress is to expand the use of technology to effectively track prospective student status from inquiry to application, testing, registration, and FAFSA completion. And a strategy that has been successful for us as a result of campus curtailment was the expanded use and reach of Chat Now, which directly speaks to the goal of offering students the ability to openly ask questions and navigate college so that they can attain success. The next priority is enrollment. The goals was to support accepted students by offering them continuity in the type and depth of support they receive throughout their STIC experience. A strategy that was implemented was the pilot testing of placement testing at 2 Springfield public high schools. And our next step is to create a more holistic approach that lays out a roadmap to stick, and it will add in components such as financial aid and sessions for parents and family members on the enrollment management process. A COVID strategy was cross-training teams in our testing and placement and academic advising and transfer center to access and read financial aid screens, so that as we engaged with students for testing or advising, we now have the ability and the skill to discuss with them their next steps in their financial aid process and encourage them to take that step. Priority 3 is persistence. Our goal is to improve support for students needing developmental course sequences so they can continue their studies and ultimately graduate. We expanded the use of our online early alert system. Previously, we had academic and attendance warnings, which were generic, and now we have expanded it to include a participation warning, for example, not completing work, as well as a link to the share a concern reporting option, which goes to our behavioral intervention team, and instructors are now able to personalize those messages. A strategy in progress is increasing college transition and success for 100 Males to College, STIC Men of Color, by expanding the MILE program, Male Initiative for Leadership and Education. A team of professionals are leading the efforts to reinvigorate MILE and are working on a plan to recruit and engage students currently. My apologies, my computer just disconnected a little bit here. Okay, and our last piece here has to do with completion. Our goal is to increase the number of students who are able to balance their work, college, and family responsibilities so that they can successfully complete their studies. A goal of this was to involve faculty, staff, and students in the development of a STIC Cares initiative to assist students with immediate needs. In a campus community email announcement earlier this week, you will see that there was information shared about our newly formed Cares team, which is a subgroup of the behavioral intervention team. So we're really excited about that implementation. And we do have 3 additional strategies in this completion category that we will be working on in the upcoming year. What I can also add is that I've highlighted just a few of the strategies that are in each of these priorities. And we are recognizing in our group that we do need to make some changes in our strategies based on our current working environment and how we're engaging with students. We have a group of individuals from student affairs, academic affairs, the registrar's office, financial aid, and other special guests that come in and assist us with looking at what our plan was, where we're at now, and how we need to evolve it for the future. So thank you for everyone who has contributed to it so far. Thank you.
We have the next slide, please. Okay. So I wanted to introduce Mary, our new AVP and CIO, to introduce the information technology plan. And the committee, I mentioned it earlier, the Committee on Institutional Resources was originally chaired by Inder, and so Mary is going to step into that role. We really appreciate her being here.
Thank you. So the NECHE self-study references the IT master plan. So I've selected 3 key areas from that plan to highlight today. The challenge here is that neither of the documents really provide specifics found in the IT 5-year capital plan related to the cost of supporting infrastructure, deferred replacements of major equipment, and secured systems that are critical to our operations. So by focusing on these priorities, I hope to provide a better picture of the current state of IT by discussing the challenges, accomplishments, and future commitments for the college. And I'm also working to make sure that the self-study is reflective of these changes given the turnover. So the first priority here is aligning IT funding and resources to support the IT infrastructure and operations. And so a major challenge here is that non-funded IT capital investments is significant. Over the next 5 years, IT has roughly 8.2 million in unfunded budget needs, and that's about 1.6 million per year for the next 5 years. So this includes deferred and warranty replacements of major equipment, applications, and security systems. So to highlight some of the accomplishments that have happened in 2019, the firewall was replaced with a Cisco firewall, next gen appliance that has integrated security features roughly at a cost of $214,000. Physical servers were replaced with virtual server environment, and this provided more effective distribution of resources and the ability to stay current on patches and updates since the old server environment was reached end of support, roughly 410,000 investment there. And of course, the core switch failure that happened in 2018 was really a costly IT replacement that was not budgeted at the time. So emergency funding was allocated to cover the cost of the 408,000. So, future commitments here really involve ongoing funding. We roughly have 25% of the remaining switches on campus that have really reached end of life. We have an upgrade to the wireless controllers, phone system, and storage appliance, which I'll talk about a little more in a minute. The commitment here is really required from the college and the Board of Trustees that we start to be proactive instead of reactive in strategically funding IT, similar to the way that building and infrastructure has a dedicated annual funding source from the campus master plan. So moving on to the second priority, which is confidentiality, integrity, availability of information resources. And this really is about keeping systems and information secure, providing failover and redundancy of our systems, and having a strong backup and disaster recovery program. So a challenge here is our storage area network, which is a SAN array, is obsolete. This is needed for backups, redundancy, disaster recovery. Current systems are outdated and not really reliable, so those are in need of replacement. And we don't currently have any offsite storage of our data. So, we need something for disaster recovery and business continuity. Also, looking at the information security policies and awareness program is an area of improvement. And we do have quite a few older computers and laptops on campus that have Windows 7, which Microsoft ended security support and patching for those in January. So just to note some accomplishments, we have secured funding for the SAN replacement and offsite backup in DR, and that's roughly at a cost of $320,000, and we're working on that project now. Firewall that we replaced does have integrated threat and malware protection. Life cycle switch replacements that were completed have better security, and they are under maintenance right now. And a large percentage of our computers that were part of the refresh now have Windows 10, which has better security. So where we are going in the future here is really trying to ensure that all the equipment and systems are updated and patched. And again, this ties back to the first priority, which is the funding. We are going to revise and test the disaster recovery plan. And we're also working on implementing single sign-on technology, password management tool, and looking into evaluating multi-factor authentication. And so the final area is the technology and systems to support students, faculty, and administrative areas. And again, challenges here are keeping applications and systems up to date on the most recent version and utilizing the best features and functionality that we have available to us. Funding for classroom technology is a challenge. New administrative systems and software requests that we get all the time, and managing and prioritizing those. And also managing online and remote users during COVID, providing the same user experience and remote access to technology. So just to highlight some of the accomplishments that have been done, obviously building 19, 1.1 million invested in technology in that building. The computer replacement plan, investing in new computers, laptops for classrooms, labs, faculty, and staff. The last 3 years, $1.5 million. and recent upgrades to the colleague self-service applications, and the addition of a Zoom campus license. So future commitments here, we are evaluating a virtual desktop infrastructure, which would be to support remote and online access to software for students off campus that cannot get to those high use applications. Also, we've committed, in the funding in the computer replacement plan refresh of 2.3 million for the next 4 years. We are going to move forward or get going on the implementation of the student planning and advising system. And also we are committed to finding ways to enhance support systems for students, faculty, and staff in the online environment. So that's in the Blackboard space, and also providing technology to students, whether it be the hotspots or the Chromebooks. So, as I've outlined here, a major obstacle in implementing the IT plan is obtaining a consistent funding source for our infrastructure and systems. Everything mentioned in points 2 and 3 all tie back to the funding that is listed in part in the first bullet point. So what I'm doing is making a case for these priorities so that we can ensure that we can update and provide secure technology to the STIC community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And now to discuss the campus master plan commitments, we have Deb Avery, Senior Director of Facilities. Oh, Deb, you need to unmute.
Hi everyone. Thanks, Suzanne. So I'm going to talk about the Campus Master Plan, which was an original study that was done years ago and recently updated in 2019. It identified the college's current and future needs to ensure that our facilities and space were put to their best use, both to support our programs and also our overall mission. It was also intended to address over $315 million of deferred maintenance that we have on our campus. Building 19, which was completed in 2019, was the beginning of the consolidating of the campus footprint and bringing student service offices to the north side of the campus, which was one of the original intents of the campus master plan. Then the second piece was to identify projects to follow Building 19 and fill in the vacated spaces. So the second phase, which was taking those projects, prioritizing them, and phasing them to support the programmatic needs and resolve accessibility issues. So once they were identified, they actually broke the projects into 4 phases to be implemented over 5 to 9 years. So the first objective, or phase 1, was relocating the health sciences programs from Building 20. They did not have a location at the time, but we are currently in the planning phases of this project, and we are continuing to work with DCAM. In addition, to support the vacating of Building 20, it also includes, phase 1 also includes a relocation of electrical and the robotics programs, and co-locating them in Building 17 with mechanical engineering, technology, and photonics and optics. And that move also addresses one of the other objectives, which was to affiliate similar programs to gain efficiencies. Then phase 2 focuses on the backfill of the spaces that were vacated when we move people into Building 19. And the nice thing about this is that because we move those people over, we're left with empty spaces that we can easily renovate to take care of a lot of the deferred maintenance that needs to happen. And again, we've done a lot of the work on phase 2. Buildings 7 and 8 were renovated, and subsequently we moved in Cass and Gateway to College into those buildings. Facilities was relocated to Building 16 into the space vacated by admissions. And then additionally, we also started working with workforce development in helping them to support their growth and expanding into Building 27. Then finally, we are continuing to work with the campus police to design and relocate them to the first floor of Building 15, which was vacated by the registrars, and eventually to renovate their building for online learning. Then phases 3 and 4 are co-locating some programs with electrical and robotics, which we already talked about. We're also doing a roof replacement in Building 32, which houses our HVAC and energy programs. We're allocating and upgrading a dedicated lab for our fire science program in Building 17. And we are also upgrading our existing labs in Building 2 and 17 with the focus of making them more accessible, because currently we do not have any completely accessible labs in Building 2 and 17. So the last piece is to maximize the capital funding. We have a combination of STIC capital dollars and DCAM funding, and we continue to use those funds to support these projects and take care of the deferred maintenance on campus. And one of the things that we've been doing is certified studies. So we have house doctors that are architects and engineers that come in and do certified studies, which look at all of the deferred maintenance and then prioritize it for what should be done now, what should be done in 1 to 3 years, what should be done in 5 to 10, and so on. And then we take the feedback that we get from those surveys, and we continue to review and revise our master plan based on that information. So that allows us to utilize the STIC capital and the DCAM funding to make sure that those two different pots of money work together to support the campus master plan. Then we also have been looking at other options for funding as well. We have worked with the grants department on a few of our projects, and we're currently trying to partner with National Park Services because they were just allocated funding for deferred maintenance from the federal government. So our goal is obviously to continue to review and revise and move this plan as we forward. One of the things that I know will probably have a large impact on this plan and where it goes from here is the results of COVID and our move towards more online learning. So again, we'll continue to review it and make modifications as we go forward and make things happen like we have been.
Thank you so much, Deb.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So now we're at the question portion of the afternoon. And so we want to open the floor for questions and just see if we can answer anything live. If not, we've captured some questions from over the last couple of weeks and we can begin to answer those as well. Okay, so I see somebody's hands raised. And I'm going to. I think you're able to speak. Is Kim? Kim, I think your microphone was unmuted. Kim Broderick.
Yeah. Will you be publishing the results of the Standard 3 survey?
Yes, we will. So the Standard 3 survey is specific to Standard 3 for organization and governance, and it's done under the purview of the self-study. And so, yes, we will be not only publishing the results, but then also integrating that into the self-study report itself.
Thanks.
And can I add something there? You heard some of these plans and their living documents. Some of that needs to be integrated into the self-study. And one thing I didn't mention was that along with the self-study, there will be what they call an electronic workroom. So it'll be a lot of the documents that are referred to will be available to the visiting team. And the results of that survey will be one of those documents. And the survey is meant to be repeated each year. And so we can see our progress on some of those questions.
So Suzanne, a question that I've heard is, you know, I'm very busy and I'm trying to work on my midterm grades and everybody's really busy. So why should I read the self-study and why do I care about NECHE?
Okay. As I mentioned to the Board of Trustees the other night, one of the reasons that we should all care about NECHE and that we do accreditation is because our federal funding and the federal funding for our students does depend on that we have accreditation. So that's one of the simple answers. But another answer is that accreditation is meant to assure quality of the institution and to foster improvement, both of those things. And the staff from NECHE repeat that over and over again. And we all, to the extent that we are invested in our college, we all have a stake in assuring the quality of our institution. The fostering improvement part is where the candor comes in. So NECHE, another thing they repeat over and over is that this self-study should be candid. And we need to have the freedom to identify the places where we need to improve. We want to applaud ourselves for what we're doing well, but we need to identify, we need to identify where we want to improve. Those appraisals, as we said earlier, flow into projections or commitments. That flows into the next strategic planning process. So to the extent that we all have a stake in the future of the college, this is where we can shape that. And so for me, I think it's really exciting. It's exciting that we get to have this input.
We have a question from the audience. Have we identified who the final editor will be for a unified voice? And so I think what the question is asking us is about the one voice editor. And so at this point, the one voice editor that has been identified is Matt Gravel. So he has already been identified as the one voice editor, and he will likely take over that one voice editing in the month of January after this semester has kind of quieted down a bit.
Chris and Suzanne, I see that there's a question in the chat. Let me pick up the question that was submitted in advance. Let me read that out. The question was, how optimistic our administration, the NECHE self-study co-chairs, and our Board of Trustees about the college's chance for full reaccreditation? Based on the current draft of the self-study, is there a chance that we would be looking at a probationary reaccreditation? So, you know, I'll speak from experience. I have served on a visiting team. I know Suzanne has as well. What I would offer is that we should be incredibly optimistic, of course, that we will receive accreditation. What we tend to see is a lot of focus on finances by visiting teams and the commission themselves. Clearly, Mount Ida, to be very specific, spooked a lot of folks and has raised a lot of different questions. But we are being pressure tested, if you will, already by the Board of Higher Ed and others around things like our cash flow, which are not raising concerns. So I don't anticipate those. Whether we give, again, some of the terminology, probationary or otherwise, I think we will again be fully accredited. What they may ask for is a update, a status report, if you will, in 2 years. And again, it won't be a surprise when they say, we need to hear more about your facilities. Where are you with all of that deferred maintenance? So again, that's what the candor is that Suzanne mentioned, is we're essentially telling them the things that we already know about. They may say, yes, absolutely, you're a strong, necessary, mission-driven institution, but in 2 years, yes, please do tell us more about where you are. Chris and
Right.
Suzanne, I don't know if you want to chime in on that.
Yeah, I will. So most universities and colleges and universities are continued in accreditation. There's kind of a multi-step level. And so in the first step, and we have received a continuation of accreditation with some notes called areas of emphasis. These are things they want to see in our comprehensive self-evaluation this spring. And these include things like refining and implementing the student success plan, addressing the college's goals for diversifying faculty and staff to more closely mirror the diversity of students, achieving retention and graduation goals with emphasis on developing academic pathways that incorporate successful developmental initiatives, and then implementing facilities plans with emphasis on completing planned renovations and reducing the institution's deferred maintenance backlog. Those were the 4 that came during the interim report. And then a 5th, after we moved business programs to fully online, was added as another area of emphasis. If there was not enough information, then we may be placed in what's called a deferment of action. This again still means that we're continuing in accreditation, but it allows the college on their own to find some more information and provide it to the commission. This is usually done within 2 or 3 commission meeting cycles where you're able to provide that information again. The next step of that might be what they would call a notation. The notation is meant to say things as they are can't continue and should not worsen. This is still a kind of collaborative affair with the college, where we would still be continued in accreditation. There would be no probation, but there would be some specific areas to correct. And this is what Dr. Cook was speaking about. And then if those corrections were not made after that 1 or 2 year period of time, that's when the possibility of probation comes into play. So what I did this morning when I saw that question was I did a little bit of research. Ben Franklin Institute of Technology in October of this year had a notation about finances. Pine Manor College in April of 2020, again, about finances. And so there's a pattern of, financial problems that come up as notations. 2 points to note: in January 2019, Southern Vermont College had a notation about not only financial resources, but overall institutional resources. In September 2018, Goddard College did not meet the standards from Standard 3 on internal governance and also Standard 7 on institutional resources. And then in 2015, Wheelock College was also provided a notation as it related to shared governance issues and communication and involvement of faculty in academic program planning and budget development. So I went through all of the available resources that are on NECHE.org, and anyone can go see those. And it relates to not only notations, but probations and then loss of accreditation. Those are all available on the website. I hope that answers the question in total. Are there other, Suzanne, do you have another question for me?
I do. Okay, I have one for you. I'm going to put on my best Nora O'Donnell face. Okay, so this came from a question that was raised recently, and I'm just going to read it verbatim. I've been reading the self-study. It is not 100% accurate, embellished, omission of facts that would make the college look bad. Can you address this?
Okay, well, first, the self-study is meant to put the college in its best light, but also to be candid, to provide enough information to be candid about the things that we need to correct. First, I will say that the Blackboard course shells that the committees first started working on are still available. So at any time anyone would like to go look and see what the committees found and compare them to the current draft, they can do that. And we've left those there to make sure that we maintain integrity in the process and to maintain transparency as well. Throughout the process, I've been the person responsible for the reports themselves. And so I've tracked the changes that have been made either through editing and or by first readers and or by editing through the second readers, which were Dr. Cook and Matt Gravel. So we had a number of people that provided feedback, and though that feedback was taken in and the changes were tracked to be sure that there was no large omissions, large deletions and things like that. So I feel really comfortable with that, but I also know there is still time for people to detail issues they see in the self-study report. So if you have been a part of a committee and you feel like your voice was heard differently or has not been heard at all in that committee, you still have the opportunity to use the feedback survey or to contact Suzanne and myself to talk about those details. It's important for us to know the details surrounding that. When we authored this report over the summer, we felt that we did strong justice to what the committees had to say, and we each edited each other's writing. And so we really felt that there was a lot of things identified. Appraisals are not completely done. And again, projections are not completed. So along those lines, Suzanne, how do I know that the data is real? Is it massaged? Has it been manipulated at all? How do I know it's not false?
Okay, thank you for that question. I love to talk about data. So a couple of things about NECHE and what NECHE is asking of us. They don't prescribe how exactly we have to meet the standards. And so we get to tell our story. But one of the things that is kind of prescribed is they have these data first forms for every standard. They're actually very prescriptive about what they want. And so, for example, standard 8, they're looking for our retention rates, our graduation rates, information about student success. And the way that information is produced, it comes from multiple sources. So they want to see our iPads graduation rates. They want to see any other information that we have that comes almost from an external source. So we we participate now in the VFA, the Voluntary Framework of Accountability. They have very specific specifications for how we collect our data and report our data. So does iPads, that's the federal government. When we do that reporting, we are always concerned about auditing. So we report data to the Department of Higher Ed. In that NECHE data first form in standard 8, we will be putting that information in, what the Department of Higher Ed has then done with that. The registrar's office reports our enrollment to the National Student Clearinghouse, which then produces its own reports on retention, enrollment, retention, graduation. So we have these various sources that we feel like we can triangulate with to be sure like that the graduation rates we're coming up with, that they're truthful and that that they make sense. We also, again, as I said, we're concerned about audits. So when we're reporting to the federal government, we have checks and balances. We have our original specifications were done by IT, but we have several eyes on that data before it goes out. So we feel very confident in the data that we send out in reporting. As far as internal analyses that we do, so we do a lot, as institutional research, there's a lot of ad hoc kind of analyses. And for that, again, we try to work with whoever's requesting the information. So for that, we're taking usually data out of an administrative system that changes day to day. There's definitely areas where there may be data entry errors, there may be coding issues. So we work with the registrar's office, the admissions office, academic affairs, whatever areas that are involved in inputting data, to make sure that whenever there's a coding change or something, that we understand what the effect is on our data. But then we also have a practice in IR. When someone asks us for something, we always say, what do you need this for? And it's not because we're trying to be nosy, it's because we're trying to make sure we give you, we want to have a conversation. Okay, you're trying to calculate a retention rate for your program. Okay, we think you need this kind of data to tell that story. We expect that there's a conversation. So when we give data out for program review, we present it to program chairs. If they see something that doesn't look right, we expect that they tell us that. And so an example of that would be, one time I presented data on just the number of people in a program, and the program chair said, no way, that's too high. We don't see that many students. And so we said, okay, we'll go back and check. We will check our data. We do. And we looked at, okay, who are the students in this program and what are the courses they're taking? And as it turned out, there were a lot of first-year students who were applied to that program, in the program, had not yet taken the courses and were not yet seen by or known to that department chair. They were taking developmental coursework. And that was an interesting finding, actually, for that department to know there are students who want to be in your program who are still who haven't taken one of your courses yet. So we expect that there's a conversation when we're doing these kinds of internal analyses. We also expect to be challenged. So an example, in Standard 8, there was just a conversation last week. If you go in there, look at it, there's a chart in there that shows the percentage of credits that students are taking that are in developmental coursework, and it shows it going down over time. And it says, this is showing that students are reducing their time spent in developmental coursework. And there was a conversation about, wait a minute, does that really show that? Is that really showing time spent, or is it showing something else? What if students are putting off their developmental coursework? So that's not decided yet. We may need to go in and relook at that. And that's the kind of feedback, though, that we're expecting that people will have for us.
Okay.
And then I want to say one other thing about data and ethics. The people in institutional research, we have a national organization that's also mentioned in the standard that that national organization has a code of ethics. I attach that to my reviews every year. And in that, you know, you can go to the Association for Institutional Research website, but in that, they talk about how we need to be responsible for how, when data leaves our office, to the extent that we can or that we know about it, for how it's used and interpreted. So,
Thank you. So we
yeah.
have some other questions on here, Suzanne, so I'm going to cut you off. I'm sorry.
All right.
But they're
So I'd
live
love
questions.
to talk about this.
So the first live question we have is, it expected that the unknown with the COVID situation will have an effect on the report, or what will be expected or asked of us during the visit in April? So we know that the COVID situation has already been integrated into the report and will continue to be as we move on in the preparation of the report. We also know that it is likely that our visit will be virtual in April. We are having an initial kind of connection to our site visit chairperson. Is that what they're called? I can't remember the exact name.
And I'll jump into Chris, but yes. Yep.
The site visit chairperson, and that's going to be virtual as well. So
this is a great question from Jasmine. And what I want to assure, and I see we're running short on time, but also for the 80 plus attendees still on this, these are our peers. The chair of the visiting team is President Richard Hopper, who's at Kennebec Valley Community College in Maine. So again, the chair of our visiting team is a community college president. He is living this with his own institution. The other members of the visiting team are also from New England community colleges. They are similarly living this. The commission itself, right, the commissioners are at New England colleges and universities. They all are experiencing COVID just as we are. That's the brilliance, if you will, of our accrediting body, is these are people who work in this same field of higher education that we do, they similarly understand there is a lot of effort going in and a great deal of uncertainty still in front of us. So I take great comfort in knowing that our peers are the ones who are going to be visiting us and essentially assessing us.
And so then the last question I have is, how will the program closures affect our accreditation through the eyes of NECHE? So I'll just add from the author's point of view that we have already included those program closures in the self-study report, as well as the other factors, including the union's response, the protest outside of the college. We've provided as much detail as possible, and we'll continue to provide more detail as it relates to the status of the ad hoc committee, et cetera.
Yeah, what I'll offer, and then I want to give the last word to Suzanne and Chris, is that I actually have seen the inverse, both as a visiting team member and also in looking across the landscape. If the college took no action, that is more likely to prompt concern. As you heard from Chris, the sort of tick list of financial problems that you hear, we can go back to a 2007 report from Academic Affairs presented to our own trustees that talked about how expensive it is to operate STCC. I think this is the types of things that a visiting team looks at, is how is the college addressing its financial difficulties? The fact that they're going to see action on that, I will speak individually, and as the president, I believe that they will treat that as a net positive. I have no doubt they're going to hear from folks loud and clear about process, communication, governance, and what have you. But the fact that the college is seeking to address its financial challenges, and especially when you add in the significance of the facilities costs, they might actually even be surprised to see that type of effort being put in. Again, I can't speak for other institutions. I can't speak for ultimately that visiting team with how they see that, but oftentimes they see inaction when they go to other institutions, inability, or whether it's an unwillingness to actually address some of these really significant fiscal challenges. So I don't actually believe it harms us at all when it comes to the accreditation process. But I'll defer back to Chris and Suzanne.
So I don't have any more questions that were sent to me, nor do I see any in the chat. So I think we've kind of exhausted the time frame. So please, if anybody has any questions about the process or about the project or about the product itself, please contact Suzanne or myself directly, and then also use those survey feedback forms. We're going to send out the draft again, so it kind of reaches the top of your email pile. And it will also, that same email will include the survey. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for all this time. Appreciate it.